Hi, hello, Khalid.
Hi, Mandy.
Right, so we're going to have a little conversation tonight about the moon and the sun. And we're going to kind of keep it quite straightforward because I'm going to talk about, well, with you, Khalid, but I'm going to talk about the moon and the sun in the air signs, which is Gemini, Libra and Aquarius. And you're going to kind of lead the way with the fire signs, Aries, Leo and Sagittarius.
Right.
So that's kind of what we've agreed that the topic of conversation is tonight. And I just thought to kick it off, I did have a look just to be absolutely sure. Right now, we've just had yesterday a new moon in Taurus.
Right.
And the moon is actually still in Taurus at the moment. So both the sun and the moon right now are in Taurus. We're not talking about the earth signs, right, at all today, but the moon is very happy at the moment because the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. And if it's exalted, it means it's kind of like, you know, it's performing well.
Happy, yeah, comfortable.
So basically, shall I start then? And
Go ahead. Yes.
But I kind of like think maybe before we sort of talk about the specific signs anyway, maybe we should kind of just say what we both think, what the sun and the moon represent within themselves before you kind of like identify them with a particular sign.
Right. Okay. I think it's I mean, as with many other topics in astrology, the significance of what these two planets, in terms of how they actually affect people's lives.
Yes.
And in terms of the symbolism appropriate to them, it's a subject of ongoing debate. They're called the luminaries because they're the brightest objects that we can most easily perceive with our eyes. So basically, I guess according to the traditional astrology, the sun is usually associated with the conscious part of the mind. In modern psychoanalytic terms, we call this the ego. And the moon is associated with the subconscious mind, which kind of, you know, it leads us ultimately to the id, you know, or the libidinal energy that kind of moves us at an instinctual level, which often we're not aware of. So that's one, let's say, scheme of symbolism that has developed over time. And I think we inherited, maybe the roots of that from traditional Greek astrology. But it became more layered, you know, in the modern period with the emergence of psychoanalysis and with, you know, psychoanalysis entering mainstream culture. So there's that, and then there is this mapping. The mapping is very gendered, kind of, I would say, even maybe a heteronormative mapping of the sun and the moon, respectively, onto traditionally male gender roles and traditionally female gender roles. And very often in, you know, even in, you know, modern, you know, late 20th century astrologers' readings, you'll find them associating the moon with the nurturing capacity, often in relation to mothers or women in general. And the sun, you'll find them associating that with the providing kind of function, and also with with the father and with male figures, right? And you sometimes see that gender schema being applied to Mars and Venus as well, which I find really interesting, right? Mars referring to significant men in a person's life, and Venus referring to significant women in our life. And that, to me, that kind of, I mean, that both the conscious, subconscious kind of division and the male-female polarity as they relate to the sun and the moon, they're very interesting for me, because they always, I mean, interestingly enough, when I think of the sun and the moon in my own birth chart,
yeah,
along these lines, I do find that they kind of make sense, right?
well, they must resonate pretty strongly with you.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, is it okay to sort of divulge where your sun and your moon are? Because you have the sun in Leo,
right,
which it rules, and the moon in Cancer,
right,
which it also rules. So you've got a very kind of, yes, vibrant sun and moon going on.
Yeah.
Your chart.
Yeah. It's an interesting kind of let's say paradigm that we're looking at, because it's heavily gendered and quite polarized, right? And I'm not saying that in itself is like problematic in an absolute way. I'm just saying that we need to kind of work with it in creative ways to make sure that we're not kind of defining the sun and the moon, their energies, the way they work, in neat compartments, right? So I personally, I'm happy with sticking with the role of the moon as a kind of nurturer and provider, but not limiting it to like one gender, right? Kind of leaving room for specific, say, familial or just circumstances, or just circumstances specific to, you know, a caregiver-child relationship, right? I would let those circumstances really kind of reveal what the gender of the moon is, you know, in any particular case.
Yeah, it'd be very easy to sort of, with a chart like that, to be very cliche about it, wouldn't it, really?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, but obviously you've got to kind of see how it's affected by various other things as well, which we're not really sort of going to concentrate on that today. But yeah, I mean, my sun is in Aquarius, which is the complete opposite of Leo, and where the sun is supposed to be in detriment. So I do not have this kind of happy, creative, bright and enthusiastic sun. But no, that's okay. I will sort of talk about that sort of in a bit. But yeah, I kind of like feel, you know, the sun is the provider. And I can see that because, you know, the moon is only lit up because of the sun. So I don't want to make this sound sexual, but the sun is like the giver and the moon is the receiver. I mean, it's kind of like the law of nature, really, isn't it? You know, if you think of it like that. Yeah, and obviously because of the light of the sun, and the warmth of the sun, we exist, you know, like where we are situated. So the sun is absolutely fundamental. Like there's no getting away from it. Like, you know, the sun, it really is at the heart of the whole thing. And if you're going to believe in astrology, we are, you know, that is all about the journeys around the sun for all the planets. So the sun is absolutely kind of like, to me, the heartbeat of the whole thing, really. Whereas the moon is obviously the planet, or whatever you want to call it, that is closest to us, that I think we're most aware of the moon because we sort of see it change shape. You know, every night it's either grown a bit, it's gone from a new moon where there's nothing, 2 weeks later it's a full moon, and if you're lucky and it's not cloudy, what have you, you know, the full moons can be stunning, and then you see it shrink, and those cycles, they're frequent, they're once a month, and so the whole thing, it goes from nothing to full and back to nothing again every single month. So the moon is very much alive and noticeable. And I feel the moon affects the tides, the moon affects our moods, you know. So you can't you can't ignore the sun and the moon. You really can't.
Yeah.
They're both very they're very significant, and therefore it kind of just makes complete sense to me that they would be significant according to wherever they are in individual charts.
Sure, I agree. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just kind of like alive. I mean, I know everything's alive up there, but you're really aware of it, like both of them. And like the sun, I mean, sometimes we feel cold, it's a cold day, or sometimes the sun is shining brightly, it's a hot day. I mean, we feel them both, I think.
Yes.
And I like that. I really like that.
I think, you know, the way, maybe the safest way to, let's say, to decide on how to interpret the role that any particular planet performs in anyone's natal chart is to read whatever interpretations are out there and kind of decide what makes sense, right? As you know, and as you clarify in all of your new moon, full moon tarot readings, but there's the sun sign, there's the moon sign, and there's the rising sign.
Yes.
Right? The sun sign being where the sun was positioned from the perspective of the earth when you were born. The moon sign, the same, but applied to the moon, and the rising sign, the sign appearing at the eastern horizon at the moment you were born.
Yeah.
So all of these signs play a significant role. And when we talk about the sun and the moon, you need to look at how they play out in your personal life and decide for yourself, you know, does the sun reflect a kind of my personality at a more conscious level, and does the moon reflect my personality or at a more subconscious or instinctual level? And does the rising sign, as many astrologers say, represent this kind of persona or mask or style and a kind of interface through which you interact with others, right? And interestingly enough, when I've thought of what it means to have sun in Leo, moon in Cancer, and Capricorn rising, all elements from my natal chart, when I've tried to interpret them through these dominant kind of interpretive frameworks available to us today, I have found that they do make sense, you know?
Okay, so tell me about, as you're doing the fire signs today, tell me about your sun in Leo. Let's talk about what is your, first of all, what do you believe that means, the sun being in the sign of Leo, and how do you feel that resonates with you personally, as that is who you are? You are a Leo sun.
Okay, so first thing I want to say about sun signs is that there is a pretty popular kind of definition of their role as being, or their nature, let's say their energy pattern, as being a dominant theme that plays out along the length of your life, but not necessarily a theme that you will see realized fully, right? It's a kind of, let's say, an archetype, an energy archetype, and you were destined kind of to live your life through this energy archetype. And if you really develop the potentials of this archetype, you know, to its utmost, you will have achieved something like possible, I guess.
So it's kind of, so what you're saying is that it's a kind of, the sun represents a suggestion of what you should, you know, if you go for this in your life, this is kind of like what is intended for you to kind of discover in your life, like what it means to be a person that's got the sun in Leo, that's your sun. So if you're going to go with that, is that what you're saying?
Right. And I'm also saying that, kind of embodying your sun sign can only be a lifelong journey. Right?
Yes,
It's not,
yes.
as opposed to the moon sign, which we'll get to later. It's not something that you totally instinctively have. You know, the sun sign is more kind of, it's a pattern that if you manage to realize fully, you will bring out the best of what you have. You
That's
know?
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
basically, my perception of the sun in Leo, and I want to kind of see like how much of this you believe you've kind of got some sort of connection with. Okay, so I feel the sun in Leo is creative. Now, would you say that you are a creative person? Is that something that's coming or
Yes,
that you can relate to?
I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think creativity is, I mean, it's a character. I think it would be more, maybe more useful to kind of specify what type of creativity is involved here, because I think creative potential is not something that can be excluded from any one of the signs, but maybe it might be more accurate to say that the type of creativity that appeals to Leos, to typical Leos, is something that really doesn't revolve around so much around practical considerations as around what makes them feel warm, you know? So, yeah, being creative in the direction that kind of maybe empowers you and makes you feel
Yeah.
empowered and really, you know, allows you to develop along the trajectory that you feel, you know, that brings out your light, you know? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I would also say, as well as being creative, I think that goes with Leo. I also think the Leo sign is quite childlike and playful and enjoys fun and having a laugh and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
would agree.
do you recognize the child within you, kind of, would you
Yes.
say?
Yes, definitely. I'm speaking for myself and for other Leos I know. We really love to laugh a lot.
Yeah, I know
Uh,
everyone likes to laugh, but yeah, but
yeah, but it's
it's
more
kind of
like,
like that ability to be silly and not care and just, yeah, let your hair down.
yeah,
I
like
would say that's quite Leo.
to see humor in many situations, um, to have this kind of habitual optimism, I think, and not to be easily, let's say, dismayed by unfortunate events, you know, um, keeping a steady kind of fire of good cheer, let's say cheerfulness,
Yeah,
I would say.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
So
I just think the fire signs in general, I mean, I know you're sort of talking about the fire signs today. I mean, they are about kind of like enthusiasm and drive and all that sort of thing. But I think the Leo energy, I'm trying to also take into account that of the three fire signs, the Leo is the fixed fire. It's
right,
the fixed one. So how would you say that you relate to that fixed energy?
right, okay. So here's where here's the zone, the Leo zone that kind of lies in an ambiguous space between attractive and not so attractive. But basically, being fixed fire, I feel means compared, let's say, to other fire signs, or you know, let's say compared to non-fixed signs in general, you need less cues from the outside, less validating signs in order for you to feel um, to know your own to know your own worth, right? To know your own self-worth,
Okay,
you
yeah, that,
know?
I like that. Yeah,
So it's like Leos in themselves, I feel they don't need so much validation from the outside. right? And that can sometimes, that can come off in the way they interact with people, right? As in like, if it's kind of if you know, if a Leo doesn't really feel like, you know, engaging in a long conversation with someone, you know, they're quite likely to kind of abruptly, brusquely kind of cut that conversation off and kind of push the person away, you know.
Really? Okay.
You know, it's not
Would you
the
say
typical.
that that is typical of a Sun in Leo person, or is that
I mean,
you?
it's typical when the person is really, it's behaving in a way that doesn't show recognition of Leo's sense of self-worth, right? So what is often said about Leo, and what I feel is reasonably true, is
Yeah.
that they can be quite generous. They are known for their generosity, but kind of a condition kind of comes attached to that, which is that you make them feel appreciated, you know, that you don't take them for granted, and that when they talk to you and they communicate, you really pay attention to what they have to say.
So the Leo does like to shine their light and to be noticed.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about my Sun, because my Sun is the complete opposite of yours. It's amazing that we're here together, really. Right. So my Sun is in Aquarius, right, which is, as I said before, so my Sun is in an air sign. So again, I'm in a fixed masculine sign. That is where my Sun is. Aquarius is fixed. I'm really sorry about this. I'm just going to quit my Skype because it keeps bleeping and it's really getting on my nerves. Sorry, just a second. Right. That's better. Right. Yeah, so yeah, Aquarius is also fixed energy, but it is an air sign as opposed to a fire sign. So the air signs are kind of like to do with using your head and thinking everything through. It's a big communication sign. So how much do I relate to being an Aquarian? Well, funnily enough, they say that Aquarius is progressive thinking and thinks outside the box and can be a little bit eccentric. I would say once I started to understand a little bit about astrology, and because for a long time I knew nothing about astrology, I just knew this word Aquarius related to the date that I was born, and that was the extent of my knowledge. But when I started to learn about astrology and some of the characteristics that are given to the Aquarian, such as the sort of people that think outside the box and the kind of eccentric characteristic, I started to understand who I was a lot better. I couldn't argue with that at all. And Aquarius is also kind of like one of the bigger signs. It's towards like the end, you know, it's up there kind of, if you're going to start with Aries, Aquarius is almost at the other end of the 360 degrees, and it's very global, and it's very kind of like it's on the big world stage. And I kind of like it's about seeing the bigger picture rather than kind of focusing on the little details. And I would definitely say that is me. I would also Aquarius can be quite opinionated because it is kind of like using your head and all that sort of thing. And I'm not going to lie, I do like the sound of my own voice. And I do get strong opinions about things, you know, and like sometimes there are sort of certain times when I can't believe someone has managed to get me to change my mind about something. That is quite an achievement on certain things, because when I get a definite thing, like this is what I think about that, it's kind of like I've sorted that, I've got that clarity in my head, I know this is my opinion about that. And for that to budge can sometimes be like moving a mountain. But if it happens, it's wonderful, like when it does. So I think that's pretty Aquarian. They also say with Aquarius, Aquarians are kind of like friendly. I would say I'm friendly. Aquarius gets on well with like groups of people. So it's kind of like, you know, like I said, this bigger picture sort of thing. Yes, I like sort of being with a group. And also Aquarius is quite independent. Now, funnily enough, in my life, I've very rarely had to be independent just because of circumstances, you know, like I went to sort of family, to boyfriend, to, you know, home, marriage, created my own family, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm finding I'm in a position where I am being independent. And I've got to say, I'm really embracing it. And knowing that I am an Aquarian is really, really helping me to do that. I love being independent and bring it on. So I think kind of discovering astrology and discovering those fundamental things that kind of you can attach to being a sun in Aquarius person has actually really, really helped me. And I don't think I've heard anything about Aquarius that I think, no, I just cannot relate to any of that at all. That is, you know, that none of that applies to me. Not at all. The more I've heard about it, the more I think, yeah, this is me. This is who I am. You know, obviously, plus all the other things in the chart as well. We're not just sun sign people, just to sort of like clarify that. But I do think the sun is huge. So
yes.
So we were, at least with this discussion, because we chose the fire signs and the air signs, we were both able to speak about the sun from a very sort of personal perspective.
Yes.
Now, moving on to the sun, sticking with the sun, what do you think about the sun in Aries? Which obviously you're not an Aries.
No.
What do you think about the sun in Aries?
Okay, so the sun in Aries is often seen as a kind of, it's more easily recognized as the loudest type of fire energy there is, right? It's seen as the kind of sign that marks the beginning of spring.
Yes.
So emerging out of the cold of winter, right? With this burst of fire and energy. And it's also seen as the sign that it's very impulsive, and
yes.
It has, okay, if it's maybe well aspected, it has a healthy type of aggression that kind of enables it to stand its ground and get done what it really wants to do, realize its desire without kind of yielding to adverse pressures from the outside. And it has a reputation for being very self-centered, right? You know, very focused on the inner drive, you know, before anything else. And good at leadership, often very good at kind of even like, you know, a lifestyle that is very physically active. You know, a lot of Aries people are kind of noted for being
it is exalted in Aries, isn't it? It's
the sun is exalted.
Yes. So it's like, yes, it's kind of got that label. To add to it.
Yeah. So I don't actually have many Aries friends, right?
Okay.
But just going with, you know, what I've read about sun in Aries, I mean, like everything, it comes with its pros and cons, right?
Well, it's cardinal. What do you get from that as opposed to the fixed energy of Leo?
Right.
You've got the cardinal energy.
I would say that means that for an Aries contrasted to a Leo, okay, an Aries, for an Aries to maintain a kind of a healthy self-image, a vibrant self-image, and a kind of a type of life that they feel excited about having, they would need to be engaging with the external environment in a way that is challenging, right? So to some extent, they have this drive to realize and to prove themselves through encountering and conquering external obstacles. Whereas in the case of Leos, external obstacles aren't so much a problem unless they intervene directly in the space of the Leo person and really become obvious obstacles. Like Leos aren't known to go looking for obstacles or to focus on them or to kind of see a potential problem or challenge, right, to their standing, to their sense of self everywhere, right? But an Aries person is more likely to kind of have a combative approach, right, to to everyday situations and you know, and so I guess in that kind of schema, like an Aries person is more likely, a typical Aries is more likely to get kind of bothered, right, by slight, let's say, provocations which may not even be intended as provocations by people, or like slight kind of inconveniences, whereas it would take more to antagonize a Leo, right? Because they're more like comfortable in their own and the steady burning of their fire, you know, like it would take more to anger them, and possibly the result would be maybe more aggressive and more long lasting, you know. There's also another thing that's said about Aries is that, you know, they, as quickly as their temper kind of comes to the surface, at the same space it'll subside, you know. As soon as they confront what's bothering them and say what they want, what they have to say, it's just gone.
Yeah.
But with Leos, like if you really get them angry, then that could become a more long-term problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the cardinal air sign of Libra, because you've spoken about the cardinal fire sign of Aries. So yeah, Libra is an air sign, and obviously Libra is the scales, and it's kind of, you know, you kind of like think about balance, fairness. I kind of like feel, yeah, that the Libra sign to me definitely kind of suggests this fairness, harmony, partnerships, that kind of thing. It's cardinal, so I kind of like feel Libra would kind of like instigate things to kind of like, I think Libra would probably step in to kind of like try and resolve things and make things fair and square, that kind of thing. I would kind of feel there's a lot of honesty and trust, particularly with the Libra side. I might be wrong, I don't know, but that's kind of what it suggests to me. Yeah. From the symbolism, I think, yeah, cardinal air, I kind of like feel there's I know I don't want to talk about Gemini yet because we haven't sort of like got to that, but I do feel, you know, the cardinal energy to me is all about kind of like triggering things and starting things. So I kind of like, surely there must be a curiosity there, and you know, and a kind of like a desire to kind of learn. I do feel the desire there in Libra.
Yeah, and so what I've read and also what I've experienced from some family members and from friends who are Librans, is that they do like, I mean, there's something in them that gets really unsettled or bothered by conflict, disharmony, injustice also.
Yeah.
So they are motivated to offer their opinions and often to act
Yes.
um, in a way that kind of
Are they sort of peacekeepers, would you say?
peacekeepers, and also, it's important for them to, when they feel that there's a source of injustice or disharmony, it's important for them to kind of demarcate the lines of tension that cause this injustice or disharmony, to point out who
Do
is the
you feel a
victim.
Libra would do whatever it takes to try and resolve the situation? More than perhaps some of the other signs. I don't know.
Not necessarily in terms of action, but at least at an intellectual level,
Yes,
right?
they would sort of, oh yeah, definitely it's intellectual because it's an air sign. There was something else that I was kind of thinking I wanted to say about Libra, which I think was probably to do with like relationships. I kind of like, I'm inclined to think that the Libra would make the first move. It wouldn't think twice about making the first move, and I also do feel that in the event of a relationship, if there was a problem, the Libra would kind of like want to talk about it, I'd be very surprised if a person's got their sun in Libra, if they are kind of, when you get these relationships where they sort of say, they don't really sort of talk to me, we never discuss our relationship. I'd find that hard to believe with a Libra. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I've ever had a relationship with a Libra to sort of know that for a fact. But that's the impression that I get, a sun in Libra person.
Yeah. No, I know, I would say 2 Librans very well, and they definitely like to talk things through.
Yes.
And it's really important for them to feel like when they're having a discussion about anything, that they're covering the issue from all the potentially relevant angles, that they're not, leaving anything out of the conversation,
Yeah. Yes.
They don't like to jump to conclusions when they're thinking something through. And I
Okay.
can see that also coming out in their relationships, And one thing that is known about Libra, which I find really fascinating, right, is that, the same sense of justice that might lead them to take strong positions against, or in relation to certain social issues, very often leads them to be unsure about themselves, right? Because they're constantly kind of weighing pros and cons, right? They're constantly in the mode of balancing and evaluating. So when they look at themselves, they often aren't sure, whether they're proceeding in the wrong direction or not. And they're famous for being indecisive, right? And which makes sense. Like if you look at
Really?
the flip, yeah.
That's because I would have said that was more Gemini.
I mean, that is there, but I think in a different modality. I think
Okay.
with Librans, the kind
Yeah.
of the indecisiveness comes from this tendency, right, to look at things from several angles, right, and therefore not have an easy time selecting one particular course of action because their attention is more evenly distributed
Yeah.
over several
I
different
would
places.
imagine if you get a well-balanced Libra, you'd probably have a very kind of reliable partner, whether it's as a marriage partner or whatever, a relationship, or whether it's as a business partner. I kind of like feel that in certain ways, surely they've got to be a very sort of like ideal person to move forward with, because I would have thought it would be very fair. I would have thought it'd be very honest. I would have thought it'd be very transparent, the situation. I mean, yeah, I can't speak personally on this, but because I'm not a Libra, and I've never been in a relationship with a Libra, so But that is the impression I get of the sun in Libra. But obviously, the sign of Libra is actually ruled by the planet Venus, which we won't go on about too much today. But, you know, Venus is about all things beautiful and stylish and all that sort of thing. So obviously, that would kind of like come into the equation as well. But we were focusing on just the fact that the sun is in Libra for today's discussion. So moving on to the last of the signs for the sun, what do you think of the sun in Sagittarius?
Right. I really like Sagittarian energy. I like it a lot, you know. It's got the outgoing kind of force of fire. You can sense it there. And you have a lot of inquisitiveness, and you have a lot of like optimism that they don't have to work for, you know, it's just there somehow in them, you know. And they like to travel a lot. That is not a cliche at all about Sagittarians, you know. They are the travelers of the zodiac, you know, and they're always
because the Sagittarians is the mutable fire.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And some astrologers, like Claire Martin is one of them, believe that Sagittarius represents the most mature kind of manifestation of the fire energy, you know.
Oh, okay.
Interesting thought, yeah. But yeah, very inquisitive, very optimistic, and interested in understanding things from a broad level, right? Or from a broad perspective, which is why I believe that, you know, they're linked to the ninth house in astrology, the house of higher knowledge and of wisdom, right? So yeah, those are things that I've not only read about concerning Sagittarians, but the things that I've actually experienced, you know, directly with my interactions with my Sagittarian friends, you know. So yeah, and another thing is that, you know, they tend to be they tend to be more receptive. They tend to be more receptive to let's say the energy of other people compared to Leo and Aries, right? Sometimes to the point of kind of allowing, let's say, a level of intrusion that is not so good, not so healthy. But when they choose to kind of retaliate in a situation that they perceive as unjust, their retaliation can be very decisive, you know. And so that's often compared by Sagittarians themselves as, you know, the archer letting the arrow loose.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
You know, I think that's a really nice metaphor to work with for Sagittarius kind of.
Yeah, my sister's Sagittarius.
Yeah.
You met her. Yeah.
Yes, I met her, yeah.
Yeah. Did she strike you as being a sun in Sagittarius?
She was definitely very bubbly, and she just clearly loved to laugh, you know. And I definitely felt that kind of natural optimism.
Yeah, and I would say she has got she loves traveling, but I would say she has got that spirit of adventure about her. You know, she's really willing to give all sorts of different things a go, and she will throw herself into them. So yeah. So
what's interesting also about Sagittarius is that it's got quite a bit in common with Aquarius, I believe. You know, because both signs,
that makes sense.
Both signs really hate to be restricted, right?
Yes.
Aries hates to be told what to do. Leos hates to be given short shrift, kind of not having proper attention. And Sagittarius hates to be restricted in their options and movements and their beliefs, right? Being
Absolutely.
Told how to think, you know?
Yeah, very good.
So I think that kind of throws out a line of connection to Aquarius.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I kind of like feel that the sort of philosophical side of Sagittarius, do you know what I mean? Like wanting to know what life is all about and those deep conversations. I mean, I get that from my sister as well. She likes a bit of philosophy. I mean, she is my sort of obvious Sagittarian to kind of sort of, you know, tick the boxes with. And
Right. And not to confuse the houses with the signs, and you and I spoke about this before, but I have 3 planets in the 9th house, which is traditionally the house of Sagittarius.
Oh,
the house most organically linked to Sagittarius. And I kind of feel like it's a part of my life's mission to understand life from a philosophical angle.
Yes.
You know,
You're very philosophical. Definitely. Yes.
And I can be quite, you know, really quite harsh with myself if I feel like, you know, I'm not really succeeding at explaining to myself an issue, you know. And as soon as I'm reading about a religion or a philosophical kind of system, as soon as I see a flaw in the system, then it doesn't work for me, you know.
Right.
So that's, I think those are qualities that appear as a result of planets being in my 9th house. But
I think, I kind of like feel if someone's sun is there, I kind of like feel that is kind of like, you know, that is kind of fundamentally, like you said right at the very beginning of this discussion, that is going to kind of like be with them day in, day out of their lives, and it's going to kind of grow and develop throughout their lifetime. So okay, so the last one on the sun is the mutable sun in Gemini. And so Gemini's being the air sign and mutable being sort of flexible thinking, open-mindedness, chatty, inquisitive, all that sort of thing. I would say friendly. I would say all of the air signs are pretty friendly in their own different way, but I definitely think Gemini would be very friendly on a kind of very sort of personal, kind of down-to-earth sort of level, you know. And I feel that the Gemini wants to kind of constantly be chatting to their friends, you know, and interacting with kind of people, even if it's trivial and it's not about anything necessarily that important. They will kind of reach out and want to get in touch, and I think fascinated by little bits of trivial information as well. But also I think they could be quite fascinated by important information too, but they're not necessarily going to kind of by instinct or no, that's more the moon, isn't it? But by their nature, I just feel it's like tidbits. It's a build-up of little tidbits, little bits of, you know, info. I kind of feel like Gemini is more likely to sort of like read columns in magazines. I hope I'm not being rude to Gemini people, and I do have a Gemini moon, but I think they're more likely to sort of just read little columns in magazines and a little bit of this and a little bit of that than kind of by nature reading constantly great big encyclopedias, you know. That's how I sort of see Gemini. And as I say, my relationship with Gemini is, well, 2 things. One is my best friend that I grew up with from childhood, from the age of 5 to about 25. I had this one best friend that was constantly there. She was Gemini, and honestly, we would ring each other up continuously throughout the day, and God knows what we sort of talked about, but we did it from 5-year-olds to 25-year-olds, you know. And it was kind of like constantly just, it was so Gemini. That phone would ring, it's like, well, there she is again, kind of thing, you know. And the other thing is my Gemini moon, which is we'll sort of talk about later when we sort of talk about the moons. But yeah, I mean, that's my impression of the mutable Gemini, but I feel mutable is changeable. And Gemini, I think, has this reputation of being two-faced. And I don't know, I think that's a little bit unfair, because I'm not saying there are no two-faced Geminis, but I feel just Gemini can change their mood and can change their mind, but whereas Aquarius can be so fixed and opinionated, Gemini is much more likely to be open-minded, adaptable to change, all those kind of positive qualities. And I would say very much, like you mentioned it with the Libra, seeing both sides of the argument, I would say Gemini would kind of get that as well quite easily.
From my experience with the Geminis, I felt that they are kind of motivated by this energy of play, as you say. And that does make them very dynamic conversationalists.
Yeah.
You know? And often that shows up in a good sense of humor as well. But it's sort of a different kind of, I would say a different kind of, let's say, mutability, or a different kind of versatility, from what you would see in a typical Libran or typical Sagittarian, because like a typical Libran would be interested in looking at things from different angles, because they have a sense that it is important to do so, right? In order to be fair to the issue. A typical Sagittarian also would feel that there is a philosophical issue at stake, right? So therefore, different angles do need to be considered, right? With Gemini, I feel like it's more about enjoyment, like enjoying occupying kind of different perspectives, you know, and not necessarily committing to anyone, right?
Yeah.
So I have a relative who is a Gemini, and she very frequently plays devil's advocate. And I noticed that she would do this even, I mean, most of the time when she wouldn't have enough information to, you know, present the contrary unpopular opinion in an informed kind of way, right? But she's always like kind of motivated to kind of, you know, say the contrary thing, you know, present, you know, another side.
Almost like a sort of form of entertainment for her.
Yeah, it's just kind of, they get energized by kind of, you know, shifting to the other perspective, or having many perspectives, you know, or even you know, digesting many things at the same time, you know. One thing that, interestingly, even, you know, Gemini natives themselves have spoken about, to me at least, is that their versatility, their intellectual, their existence on this intellectual plane in a very fluid way, in a constantly moving way, also can make them inconstant,
yes,
moody in relationships.
Okay.
You know?
Yes. Oh yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so I just, I mean, between me and myself, I think like, yeah, what would it be like to be in a relationship with a Gemini? You know, would it be something that could appeal to me or not? And for me, like I remember there's like one typical, or one incident with a Gemini friend that I came to consider as typical of a kind of a Gemini shortcoming in relationships, is that, you know, I'd sit down and I'd be having a conversation with him, and like we were in a restaurant, and then every person who came in, he would turn to look at them and study them, like,
oh,
you know, while I was in the middle of the story, and it would be like a very intensely complicated, elaborate story, you know.
Yeah.
you know, but that attention, that's like, it was so textbook Gemini. It's like, you know, being unable to kind of contain your attention and
Yes.
focus on someone, you know. So I was like, okay, it feels, of course, the Leo in me was really wounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but it was, it was interesting to think, like, how does that mutable air kind of energy, which does have advantages, has many advantages, I think it can make them very creative, actually.
Yeah.
But how does it manifest in kind of in relationships that require commitment? You know,
You could
yeah.
say the same about Sagittarius as well, couldn't you? With that mutable fire, that could kind of take their attention all over the place as well.
It could, it certainly could, but I feel like because fire is passionate, maybe it comes from here. I feel like it wouldn't be too difficult for a Sagittarian to find a partner, right, and commit to that relationship, provided that the partner um, understands the importance of personal freedom, right, and that that there isn't that much of a gap between the partner's worldviews and philosophies and morals, and that held by the Sagittarian, you know. In the case of the Gemini, I wonder, like, this kind of being drawn to kind of play with ideas and positions just for the joy of the play. Does that?
Well, I know that relationship wise, it's getting dark in here, so in a minute we'll take a little break. I might actually do the moon on a separate video. Actually, I think we should sort of wind up this sun, and we will go on to the moon today, but we'll do it as a separate video. And I'll put the light on because I'm going to disappear in a moment. It feels right, but but I know that they sort of say, oh, you know, relationships are good if you've got the same element with the same element, you know, like with fire with fire or air with air, but that also fire and air go pretty well together. But would you put a cardinal fire with a cardinal air, a fixed fire with a fixed air, and a mutable fire with a mutable air? That is my parting question. Would you mix those?
I think so. I think I would, actually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see an issue. I think in general, I think fixed signs maybe, okay, I think fixed signs really don't work well most of the time with mutable signs. I think they work with better with fixed and cardinal energy.
I'm just thinking fixed with fixed, but they can both be stubborn in their own ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a square, isn't it? It's a 90-degree angle, fixed with fixed. No. Yeah, 90 degrees.
Wait, isn't it 180 actually?
No, that's opposition.
Right. So Taurus opposite to Scorpio, both being fixed. Right?
That would be an opposition. But what about if you had Taurus? No, what I'm saying is if you had, hang on, let me get my head around this. If you had cardinal, oh no, you're right, it would be oppositions. Yeah, if you're going with the same, if you're going with the same masculine to masculine or feminine to feminine, you're right. Yeah, it would be oppositions.
Yeah.
So it would have to, you'd have to go with the opposites attracting thing, wouldn't you? There.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for fixed signs, like, okay, so for example, if you're talking about Leo and Aquarius, I see them as the opposition on the standard with zodiac wheel, is also an avenue of attraction, right? And I feel like the element of fire and the element of air do work.
The element of fire and air do work, yeah.
You know, like air has that kind of intellectual let's say, not aloofness, I want to say, but, you know, relatively speaking, an intellectual detachment that comes more difficultly to a typical fire sign. So both signs, I see them kind of compensating each other, you know, in what they lack.
Yeah, but do you think that would work better as a kind of like a friendship or a business partnership than as a relationship? Do you see what I'm saying?
It could work as either. It could work as a relationship as well, I think.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think when in astrology, when we talk about what are the ideal factors that, you know, to consider in a relationship, it can just get enormously complicated, you know.
Yeah, you can't just base it on the sun signs, can you? But I was just throwing it out there, and I didn't even know my angles. I got so confused at that point, but it's getting dark. It's getting dark. Yeah.
One thing I just like to point out, since we, you know, because we have this this tradition now, and I'm putting it in quotation marks because my point is that it's really not that traditional. We have a tradition of seeing the sun sign as defining a person's personality, right? Being who they really are about. And I don't think it's that simple. I think it's very important to take into account what the rising sign is. And it's on a basic kind of, on a common sense level, you can understand why that would be more indicative of a person's personality, because the rising sign changes around every 2 hours, right? So it's easier to imagine people born, let's say, 2 hours apart as being different, rather than, you know, people being born in an entire 30 days all being the same. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so so a Leo with, let's say, a Capricorn rising, and I'm using myself as an example because that's my case, would really come across as unusual for a Leo. And I've had many people who, you know, after just like 1 or 2 meetings with me, they tell me, "Really, you're a Leo?" And I would never have expected that, you know. And I totally understand why, because it's important to keep in mind that the rising sign is the kind of way you interact with other people, and it's only with time that they start to see in a consistent way that what, you know, the elements of the sun sign that define you, you know. So we need to add that into the mix, and hopefully in another episode maybe we can discuss.
No, there's definitely way more to it than just the sun sign, but well, thank you, that was really interesting.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So we'll go and get a cup of tea. I'll turn the light on, and then we'll come back in a bit and do another recording for the moon in all of those signs. All right. See you in a bit, Khalid. Bye.
Bye.